My name is Barry Boffy. I'm Head of Inclusion and Diversity for British Transport Police. My good colleague from TfL has already kind of shown you a lot of what I was going to show you, and we didn't coordinate in advance, sadly. So you're going to be quite tired of looking at big orange, bright kind of graphics, but I'm going to show them to you anyway. I'm really grateful to Mark to ask me to come. We actually hosted the first conference last year at our force headquarters, and it has grown substantially, so it's really great that Goldsmith can accommodate, because we couldn't have accommodated all of you, sadly, this year. But what I wanted to kind of talk to you about really, and to kind of raise attention of our needs to some extent, so it's a bit of a plea, is to why this kind of event is really important to us at British Transport Police, particularly when we're planning things like Hate Crime Day of Action or National Hate Crime Awareness Week. So we regularly, as a police force, and for those of you who don't know, we are the police force for the entire railway network in England, Scotland and Wales. So quite a big patch. My role is I cover England, Scotland and Wales, so I'm always on the road, and I look after the internal and the external diversity and inclusion for the force. But one of the issues that we have as a police force as a result is that how do we coordinate our activity? How do we make that activity consistent across the force? And you'll remember one of my first questions this morning when we opened it up was about how do we bring this outside of London, because it's great that actually it has some real traction within London, and there's lots of London kind of borough councils here represented, and I know there's obviously activity going on sporadically around the UK as well, but in a less coordinated way. It's not quite so easy to get everyone that we need in one room. I don't think there are probably any rooms big enough to actually accommodate that. But we cover the entire railway network, including the underground and the overground and metro systems across the UK. One of our biggest issues is we are a police force that is national, but we only have 3,500 police officers, and 2,000 of those are in London. So do the math, 1,500 police officers in Wales, Scotland and the rest of England. So when we are trying to deliver kind of anti-hate crime messages or coordinate activity, it's usually we've got one or two officers covering probably one area. So a great example is I work out of Bristol, and when we do National Hate Crime Awareness Week, it's probably an officer each day doing that for the entirety of Bristol. So Avon and Somerset could do a much bigger job. We actually only have about 20 officers at Bristol anyway. So it'd be really difficult for us to do that and operational police response. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview as to why this is important, so we can coordinate, and where we started back in 2015, which is the first year that we kind of reviewed our hate crime, kind of anti-hate crime messaging, and the force, our police service, had gone through quite a major restructure around that time, just shortly before that. Whereas before that, we had 7 areas within BTP, because we're national, so we'd broken down into 7 areas. But one of the issues around hate crime was that each of those areas dealt with hate crime differently. So there was no such thing as a consistent hate crime message. If you went to the Midlands, you'd get one. If you went to Scotland, you'd get something completely different. And with that, each of the graphics was different. Each of the all of the kind of references, our kind of hashtags and things like that, when they existed, they were all completely different. So we brought all that together, and this is what we launched with. It didn't work, and I'll tell you why it didn't work. It's lovely, it's bright, it's colourful. What does travel with pride mean to most people? What do we go to automatically? The LGBT community. So this was designed as supposed to be covering all kind of protected groups, but it didn't, and people automatically gravitated to it as, oh, you're talking about the LGBT campaign. So we kind of thought, oh, actually, we really need to change that then. And this was back about a year later, which is when I probably met Mark for the first time. And Mark spoke about National Hate Crime Awareness Week, and I went, no idea what you're talking about, but sounds interesting, particularly for us, something really important and quite timely, because we haven't been doing a coordinated hate crime campaign for quite some time. So we signed up for the first year, and it was difficult, slow going, sporadic. Some officers really for it, really keen, lots and lots of activity. big swathes of the country, absolutely nothing was happening whatsoever. And we knew we needed some way of tying that together, so we rebranded. So I'm trying to scroll through. I sent it through as a PDF, apologies. And we redesigned it as the We Stand Together branding, which a lot of people will be aware of. Luckily, although in quite sad circumstances, around the same time was the the Manchester Victoria bombing in Manchester. And Manchester started to adopt We Stand Together as their kind of chant of solidarity. So it worked quite nicely for us because it actually embedded the message that we'd already designed. So actually we didn't have to redesign it at that point. And at that point, because we got some quite major attention, particularly from the Mayor of London, good old Boris Johnson at the time, but he was very keen to kind of support this, said this is fantastic, this is really great. We'd designed it in association with TfL around this time as well, 2015-16, so it kind of played to his patch of London at that time, as a really great thing for us to launch nationally. This is just a couple of lovely orange pictures of, it's everywhere on our network now. We cannot get rid of it. But we think for us as a force, that's fantastic because that's where we weren't 2 years before that. We didn't have that consistency. We didn't have that branding. We didn't have the buy-in. So we've got lots of kind of information both on our website and our social media. It's replicated constantly. We've got handouts, which I know, Tim, you showed some pictures of some handouts earlier, and specific partnerships as well, which started to develop at that point. So we diversified. We started looking at branding specific events. So Sparkle, we've been partners with Sparkle for 11 years. And then our kind of True Vision, Talmara and CSD, this is a few years ago. So this was before we kind of got involved with Gallup, and now obviously that's changing as well. And the London Transport Network. And some of the other kind of county councils across the UK kind of went, that's great, can we have that? Our first reaction was, fantastic, now we've got to, how many councils are there, borough councils are there in the UK? Does anyone know off the top of my head? Because I don't, I know it's probably a lot. How do we do that kind of 50 times, 60 times, however many councils there are? Because we'd have to do that with every single council and every single Home Office police force. So that's something we're still developing at the moment. London, great, it works. We work with the Met, we work with the City of London. We've also just done it up in Merseyside. So we've got a partnership up in Merseyside with Merseyside Police as well, but nowhere else. So if anyone else represents a different kind of council, please speak to me afterwards. We'll have a conversation. And it's at this point here that we kind of thought, okay, we need to start actually branding this week. We need to kind of have that consistency of branding both with us and recognising that specific week, National Hate Crime Awareness Week. So we tied the two together, really straightforward. Love that picture. It's 2016 now, so we're developing and developing and developing and developing. And you'll notice I'm not talking about engagement at station. For us, the easiest way for us to engage with our community is social media. And the reason being is that we don't have a resident population. We're not the Met, we're not West Midlands Police, we're not Greater Manchester Police. Nobody lives on our patch. Everyone travels through our patch, so it's a completely transient community every single day. So every day it's going to be different. So we can't necessarily target in the same way. So for us, it's always about social media and bringing that together. 2016. And then we started to make it real, kind of developing what we already had, personal testimonies, a couple of videos, particularly from people from TfL, talking about their experience of what hate crime was like, tying it into that week as well. And then there's if anyone wants to be bored by me anymore, there's a lovely embedded video of me talking about what hate crime is, particularly how we respond to hate crime on the railway network. And constant proactive messaging. Someone asked me earlier, I think Tim, you asked me earlier, are you a tweeter? Oh yes, incessantly, all day long and all weekend. I will tweet even if I'm just going for lunch somewhere, just to say I've been for lunch with this person. I think it's a really great way of communicating what we're doing, and we will continue to do that. I think it's really vital. So for us, horizon scanning, we've got more of the same this year, but we want to bring all of your experience together so that we can learn from that, so that when we're targeting particular communities, and I don't like to use that terminology, that's not what I mean, but when we're kind of raising awareness with specific communities, and particularly those communities that we may not have traditionally engaged with before. Thinking Gypsy Roma Traveller communities, absolutely right. We haven't done as much work as we should have done. So this is our opportunity really for us to learn from that so that we can start to redesign for this year. So I think that might be it. And we've got a text service. Just for those, I don't need 5 minutes, that's fine, I am literally done. One of the things that's worked out really well for us, if you don't know, is we found our particularly vulnerable communities really like our text service. It's 24/7, it goes into our control room. We're the only police force at the moment that has a reporting system that you don't have to call 999, you don't have to call our 0800 number, you don't have to email us, you can actually live message us by sending us a message, a text message on 61016. And that's really helpful. We've got to remember our environment. We're in a tin can going 126 miles an hour, and the next stop might be 45 minutes away. So we know that people aren't necessarily, if they're seeing hate crime or if they're a victim of hate crime or any hate incident, we know that it's not always that easy to pick up the phone and speak to the police because the perpetrator is right there and might be with you for the next 43 minutes. So discreet text servicing is really the way that we want to go. So that's me. That's British Transport Police. Thank you very much, Mark. Happy to take any questions. No questions, lovely. Thank you very much.